Hello and welcome back to my office again. And this is the latest Scavengers, where I talk a little bit more about the work I'm doing and how it's going, and also answer your questions. And today, again, I have a question from Omar. Now, he asked me, he would like to know if I'd read Orwell's essay on why I write. He seems to think that many writers are motivated by vanity, and that because writing a book is such a monumental struggle, only those who are trying to overcome some demon would want to do it. Well, that's a very interesting view. I really like Orwell. I've read a lot of his writing. I have read Why I Write. I don't necessarily entirely agree with him, but he was writing in the 40s and 50s mostly, at which time many writers motivated by vanity. Yes, I think that was probably true. If you looked then, the only people who could afford to invest the time to sit down and write books were people who were already independently wealthy. That's not entirely changed. There was a brief flaring of income for writers in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s until, in this country, about the mid-90s, when authors were pretty much secure financially, if they sold a small number of books. I mean, when I started out, I made a reasonable living by selling 40 to 50,000 of each title I sold. That wasn't bad. In those days, you'd get about £1.50 for every hardback sold, and you would get about 50p for every paperback sold. Now, I was selling about 1,000 hardbacks, so I could guarantee £1,500, £1,600 a year just on the hardbacks, and then I'd do another 30, 40, 50,000 paperbacks at about 50p. Well, if it was 30,000, that was 15,000 quid. So when I was starting out, that was great. When the sales ramped up to about 50,000 and I was doing 2 books a year, it was even better. Unfortunately, then of course we had the end of we used to have price protection on books in the UK up until about 1995, 1997. And what happened then was it was decided that it would be much better for the free market if supermarkets and other shops could all discount. Now, at the time we had, I don't know how many bookshops in the country. We had chains of Dillons, we had chains of Waterstones, we had chains of a number of other bookshops. But the trouble is that they all disappeared. Waterstones is the only main surviving national chain now. Otter's and all the others disappeared. In terms of local bookshops, when I came here there were 3 bookshops in Newton Abbot. There's 1 now. There were 4 shops on the outskirts of Plymouth. They've all disappeared. There was a bookshop in Dartmouth. That's gone. There were 3 bookshops in Totnes. There's 1 left. There was a pair of bookshops in Launceston. They're both gone. And that's the same all over the country. It's reckoned now that at least 90% of all the local bookshops has disappeared. And the reason why was simple. I mean, basically, a small local bookshop could bring in a Jeffrey Archer and they could sell that for the same price as Sainsbury's or Superdrug or any of the other massive companies. But as soon as they allowed the supermarkets to discount, that meant that the supermarkets could sell the books cheaper than the local bookshop could actually buy the books in, because the bookshop would be allowed a 40% discount, but the supermarkets would demand a 70% discount. It got worse obviously with Amazon, because Amazon demands 80% discounts pretty much as standard, and there's no way that a local bookshop can possibly compete with that. So because of that, the price model changed and the payment system to authors changed. So instead of getting 10% of the cover price of a hardback and 7.5% the cover price of a paperback, now it's based on net receipts. So an author will get 10% of net receipts on hardback sales, 7.5% of net receipts on paperback sales. In theory, that should be all right because the number of books sold should increase. That was the concept. But of course, it never happens like that. Publishers don't market lesser known authors. They put all their investment into the big names. So now, whereas I used to sell 50,000 books quite easily, I guess the last few books it's gone down to about 10,000. At the same time, the income per sale has reduced by up to 80%, because if Amazon demands a discount, they demand an 80% discount. I'm paid on net receipts, so the 7.5%, 10% reduces because you're being paid on 20% of the cover price instead of the cover price. Boring, right, okay. But what it means is that nowadays very few people can actually afford to make a living out of writing. And it's much more the case that only the wealthy, the already wealthy, can afford to spend the time rather than having to earn a living. So was he right? I think he probably was. Motivated by vanity, yes. I think they were in his day, and I think it's coming back to that again now. Although there is also the other side, which is a lot of school children now believe that they would like to become rich and famous. And when you ask them how, they say, oh, I don't know, I just want to be rich and famous. So you've got a number of kids who think that going straight on YouTube is the way to make themselves very rich and have a career. Others think that they'll be singers, and so they torture their families by trying to sing the most popular current pop songs. Terrifying. But there is this thing that a lot of people believe, that writing's easy because all you do is you sit in a warm house and write all day. I can do that. I remember once going to Ireland and giving a talk, and it was quite clear that the whole of the audience, they were moderately interested, but yeah, whatever I said wasn't that important because they knew they could do better, which is pretty much an Irish attitude towards writers. But nowadays, it is obviously a very monumental struggle. When I started, I remember being told that if I was to start a book, there was a 1% chance that I would finish writing it. And if I did finish writing a book, there was a 1% chance that that book would ever get published. So it was a 1 in 10,000 chance. If you sat down today to write a book, there's a 1 in 10,000 chance of actually seeing it one day in print. Now, I believe that's probably got worse by a factor of 10. So I think it's now, instead of 1 in 10,000, I think it's 1 in a million. There's so many people writing who are convinced that they can write well, that the pool of potential authors is growing all the time. A lot of those people, sadly, really cannot write. There's an awful lot. You only have to look at all the books that are free on Amazon Kindle and other places to realise just how bad some people are at writing. But that doesn't stop them. It is for them very often simply the idea that writing is easy, and they will very easily get themselves paid a huge amount of money for writing a brilliant bestseller. It's strange when you look at websites like Quora, a website where people ask questions and hope that somebody else is going to answer them. The number of people who write in and say, how can I write a best-selling book? They will, first of all, stop asking questions on Quora, sit down and write it. But don't assume you're going to write a bestseller. People assume that anyone can write, therefore anyone can write a book. Yes, they can. But to write a book that someone wants to read is a totally different set of skills. I'm not going to go into that because that's another whole talk. But writing a book is a huge struggle. I believe now, if you set out to write a book, there are so many interruptions with Twitter, with Facebook, with TV, with all of the other social media, that it's probably a 1 in 10,000 chance. If you sit down today to write a book, you've got a 1 in 10,000 chance of actually finishing it. It is that difficult now. Unless you can develop a mindset that turns off everything so that you can sit down and work, you're going to find it tough. So, does that mean that only those trying to overcome some demon would want to do it? I think basically yes. So, oddly enough, I think that George Orwell was right. And on that bombshell, I'm going to sign off for now because I've got other things I need to do. I will speak to you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope that was interesting. I'm going to go back to my cup of Williamson's Earl Grey, which is absolutely delicious. See you soon. Bye.